to Woody. The Talking Winston Education Town Blues. I went downtown the other day to see what the educators had to say. Their mood was glum, to say the least. Thought the finance board spoiled their feast. It's a tough budget request in an election year. An additional 7% or so was a request many feared. The recession has taken its toll, so they say. Townfolk ain't got no money to pay. 4 wise board members, they managed it down, asking where are the savings that should abound. They say 18.5 million should be enough. Comparable towns do it. Can't be that tough. Schools half empty, so they say. Still have all those bills to pay. Town and schools are still debating. Seems to be plenty of duplicating. Moving 7th and 8th is in the final stage. Most thought this move should save. Close one school and use the others. Not well appreciated by the mothers. Student rejections over the years, yet mandate reductions are in arrears. A large dollar reduction we may have coming. Sure could use a relief or something. The cost per student's been reduced. Yet the dollar request hands the taxpayers a noose. In all those mandates, so they say, just like local families have to pay. Educators cry, 18.5 million's not enough to pay wages, medical, and all that stuff. Last year's budget was overspent. The fund balance is now low. The town surplus went. Expenses gone up. It's very tough. Pocketbooks gone down. There's not enough. Out of work, some residents are. Can't afford enough gas for their car. Commodities leaping by a large percent. People ask where their food money went. Educators, they don't take heed. They think it's just the taxpayers' greed. Let's sue the town, the educators cry. It can't be denied. The mayor's probably on their side. Let's ask the state to help us out. Investigate the town for the supposed expenses route. The K-8 program, well, it's imploded. That's for sure. Gone haywire. The numbers are pure. FOI information, the finance board must do to get the numbers that are most likely true. The finance board has helped. If the budget's approved, the depleted fund balance will greatly improve. The town will have more money to spend. The education budget will be on the mend. The vote is soon, as we all know. Let's hope the voters many will show. The budget must balance once it's done. If the town is ever to see the sun, the problems will not be over as yet. More efficiencies are needed. We'll have to get. Let's plan for next year, or we'll all regret. For much more money, the educators will again have to get.
Hi, this is Brian O'Haron. For those who joined late, we'll be playing that again at the end of the show over the exiting statements and credits. The Talkin' Winsted Education Town Blues. The other night, Joyce and I went to see Ramblin' Jack Elliott down at the Roaring Brook Nature Preserve in Canton, Connecticut. There are about 50 people there, maybe 75. Small place. Very good. But that inspired me to draft those words for use on this program. Any way to get your message across to the public is very important in my view. Ramblin' Jack is about 80 years old now. He and Bob Dylan learned a lot from Woody Guthrie, as did Pete Seeger. Dylan used to visit him in the hospital in New York when he had Huntington's disease for about 13 years before he died. And Ramblin' Jack used to travel with him on the road and had many experiences that he often talks about. Ramblin' Jack at one time was very close in New York to Bob Dylan as well, although I don't think they're as close today as they used to be. Anyway, tonight I'm showing you a picture you see right now that I've used once before on the program, Planning for Success program, which I still run as a financial program whenever I get any important financial information. We haven't had any in quite a while. It was due, the last audit for last fiscal year was due in December, and we still haven't got it yet. The auditor's still fumbling around there. I guess they had trouble, I'm told, getting information from the Board of Education. They may or may not have that now, but we need to get that audit out so everybody can see exactly what's there and hope there aren't any surprises. When I do talk to Henry Centrella, he tells me that he doesn't think, he's our finance director, he doesn't think there's going to be any big surprises there, but you never know until you number, especially with our Board of Education. Our Board of Education is kind of interesting. So I'm going to talk a bit about my class, 1951, Migeon Avenue School, Torrington, Connecticut. I'm in that picture. You won't be able to find me. Now, hardly anybody can recognize me in that picture, but I'm there. I was the youngest kid in the class. After I talk a bit about this class and the environment it was in, I'll be showing some pictures from my Pinocchio collection. I have a small Pinocchio collection that I picked up various places. 2 or 3 of them I brought with me to put on the screen because I'm going to be talking about facts more than anything. The availability of facts tonight from the Board of Education and the credibility of the Board of Education when it comes to numbers, dollar amounts, information, dissemination, etc. So I'll be showing these pictures on and off of these Pinocchios. Now, when I was in 8th grade, I walked to school every day or rode my bicycle. Some people still ask me, "You still riding that bicycle?" But I rode the bicycle. I probably lived 1.5 miles from the school. But every child that you see in that picture walked to school every day. Many walked home for lunch or rode their bicycles. Nobody had a car that age. And then they came back after lunch, played in the schoolyard for a while, and then went into class for the afternoon. Then walked home again at night if they didn't go to some park, playground, extracurricular activity, play in the back of the school, go to a friend's house, whatever. But there was total freedom in those days for my classmates to walk the streets of the whole town, especially in their neighborhoods, without fear of being accosted, molested, or any other such villainous activity. And at night, they felt free to walk up to the pond to ice skate or to any of the other sporting events, sliding in back of the Migeon Manor on Migeon Avenue, walking down to dances at the YMCA or down in other activities, the cinemas in the center of Torrington, which cost about 10 cents in those days. So this is a happy group you see here. That's our graduation picture from the 8th grade. The teacher is in the center. Her name is Barbara Klug. She's now deceased. But she taught us a lot. She taught us a lot about saving money and the importance of being honest and straightforward and not trying to fool people all the time. And of course, earning our way in life. We were taught that nothing was free, that you had to work for a living, and you had to accept the responsibilities that life presented along the way. And of course, there were many mandates. Things we never expected happened. There were ups and downs, there were wars, there was peace. There were family events that were unpredictable. There were boyfriends and girlfriends that were unpredictable. But everybody learned the hard way to live in the environment and to respect the opinions of others, and certainly not to offend. There was the normal amount of bantering and teasing, and everybody had nicknames. If you had a peculiarity, everybody would let you know about it, much like in Winsted today. They'll find out if you have a weakness or a perceived weakness, and they'll exaggerate it and blow it up. That always happens. I guess that's part of human nature. But anyway, unfortunately now, a lot of these children that were in this picture are no longer with us. But they did spread out after 8th grade. Some went to trade school, some went to high school. Some went right into the factory, because we did have some people in our class that were 16 at the time, and that was the age when you could quit school in those days. I don't know what it is today, but it was 16 in those days. Now, there were very disparate ages in that class, because some of the members had stayed back, we used to call it, didn't pass from one grade to the next for one reason or another. Sometimes it was because they couldn't speak English in the 1st or 2nd grade and had to wait until they could to be moved on. All these children in this picture, heritage is from somewhere else, mainly from Eastern and Western Europe. Polish, German, Irish, Italian, French, a good mixture. There are also people in here from all classes. Some people's fathers owned stores and businesses. Most others worked in the mills one way or another. Some of their mothers worked, although in those days not many mothers worked. Some did in the factories, secretaries, nurses, that kind of thing. Now, I did hold a reunion when I retired a few years back, 50th reunion for this class at my cottage at Highland Lake. Most of the kids came from around the country. And I asked each of them if they knew anybody from our class who wasn't successful in life. And they all said, without fail, no, we don't know anybody. One way or another, depending on how you define successful,
Possibly.
Everybody made it. Some had some rough times in the service or around town, but they all made it. Most of them had families, children, houses, hobbies. They all enjoyed their life, and were enjoying their life, and we're thankful. There were many cousins in the class, people related to each other, and there were brothers and sisters as well. It was tough to play sports and things in those days because of the age differences of the children in the class. Some that were 3 years older were stronger, better coordinated perhaps, and kind of stood out when it came to all those things. But they all said they made it, one way or another. They got through the problems in life up to that point, 50 years after graduating, and they were happy. When I went to Joyce's reunions, I asked people there the same thing. They all kind of made it. They did a good job. But in those days, there were families that stayed together. Most of those people in that picture had mothers and fathers that were a team. Their priority was to raise the children to be decent citizens and people. They knew they had a responsibility to feed, clothe, and provide them with a good education. They used the church where they could and where necessary. And the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and all the other affiliates in town that help with such things.
Yeah, but then it messes up my whole with how they're labeled.
And
For everything
they cared about their children. But they never blamed the school system. They never blamed the teachers. They never blamed the principals. They never blamed the taxpayers. They knew that it was their responsibility to, one way or another, help their children to be as successful as they could and wanted to be in our environment. So I'm kind of happy to have been in that class, to have learned from Barbara H. Klug, who was a business lady. Her family owned a farm. She drove the tractor, helped with the bale the hay, etc., and was a good leader and inspiration to everybody in the class. Now, if you got in trouble, which I did quite frequently, they put you in the cloakroom, say, Brian, you stay out in the cloakroom today. You're a pain in the neck. You're spoiling it for the other students. They could do that then. Or they could say, Brian, you take a trip down to the principal's office, have a chat with her. She'd like to speak to you about your conduct. And she wants to know why you took little Mary's hair and stuck it in the inkwell during class. So I'd go down to the principal's office, and I'd have to sit in a chair outside the office until she was free to see me. That could take hours. She was very nice. Her name was Rose Metling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And she and I formed a nice relationship, principal-student. And I respected her, and she respected me for what we were as individuals, although she did try to get me to toe the line in a positive way. Now, if you got in trouble in the school, as I said, nobody blamed the teacher or the principal or the system or the town or the taxpayers. They told the school to do what's necessary
I think we have a tape measure or something around this. So
to keep these children on the straight and narrow and under control. It was very important. And the kids did well. We never knew how things were going to turn out. Some did extremely well in the world. Some did a little less well, but still well, relatively speaking. A lot of the things that we had, for example, nobody was bused to our school or bused home. Parents didn't have too many cars, so they didn't give anybody a ride. They were off to work early in the morning anyway. And if you weren't feeling too good, you probably did go to school anyway. I can never remember taking a sick day ever. And that's a sort of tradition that stayed with me all through my life, because I was taught from an early age by my parents and the school system to be on time for classes, to come to classes, not to take sick days unless you're really truly sick. And of course you couldn't be a truant. They had a truant officer in those days that would track you down if you were going to be truant, so he couldn't do that. But I don't remember anybody ever having to be tracked down because they were truant. People liked to go to school. They liked to be in with their classmates. They liked to play at recess and at lunch and do all the socializing we did after school at the various parks and things. We enjoyed each other's company. There was no bullying in the school that I can remember. No bullying at all. I don't remember anybody flunking out. I don't think anybody ever quit or flunked out. Not only in my first 8 grades, K through 8. We didn't have a K, of course, in those days. There was no kindergarten. So it was 1 through 8. Nor when I was in high school, and 2 years I went to trade school. Most people hung in there, did a good job. We were encouraged to not work in the factories, but to get out, be professionals, go to college. Not everybody did, very few did. By everybody in town, because most of them, one way or another, worked in the factories, and they didn't want to see the next generation do the same. But a lot of them, classmates, did go to the factories, and they did well. I once asked my dad why he stayed in the brass mill in Torrington all his whole life. He never had a different job. He worked in the rod mill with the furnaces in the middle of the summer. Terrible sweltering, no air conditioning, nothing like that. He got to work every day. He won an award for having attended work every day for 10 straight years when I was young. It had to be something pretty serious. And he walked to work and back, as did my grandfather. My grandfather walked to the barber shop every day and walked home at night. Then he'd walk down to the Sons of Italy or to downtown, wherever it was. There was no television then. Listened to the radio a lot, of course, especially during the war. So, you in this town have to remember, as we go through our problems with our education system and our Connecticut interference in our education system and our federal interference in our education system, you have to remember that we weren't all victims of that when we were young. We didn't have as many mandates as we have today from the state or the federal government. We did have some mandates. You had to go to school until you were 16. Otherwise, you might end up in reform school or something like that, if not jail. That was the one main mandate that I can remember. And if you look at that picture, you'll see people are pretty well dressed there. There's no pants falling down. There's no tops cut down to the waist on the women. And they're pretty clean and healthy looking people because they were pretty clean and healthy looking, and their moms and dads made sure that they were. Well, anyway, things have changed a bit now, and I want to talk a bit about that tonight as I go through the rest of the program. So now we're going to switch to one of the Pinocchio pictures that I have. That's a Pinocchio I picked up in Italy when I lived in Rome. I was working on a project in Rome, Joyce and I, and the first two children lived in Rome. And we spent a lot of time at the Villa Borghese, and a lot of time tramping around town with the carriage and the two children on a Saturday and Sunday when I wasn't working. And I picked up this Pinocchio. And I like to use Pinocchio on my program here because I feel that it relates to a lot of things that I'm going to be talking about. And if you remember, when Geppetto created Pinocchio, Pinocchio turned into a real human boy, and whenever he told a lie or a fib or a falsehood, his nose grew. He fell in with some pretty bad company along the way and went out to Pleasure Island, coaxed by two people that were taking advantage of him. Ended up, of course, getting swallowed by the whale. And Geppetto had to go and save him. We have problems now that I alluded to in my little blues that I stated at the beginning of the program. One of our big problems is getting truthful information in a timely manner from the Board of Education and mainly the K through 8 portion of our school system, soon to be the K through 6 portion. Although there's a lot of controversy about the semi-public or private high school we have, Gilbert, people do not seem to be as concerned about the accuracy of their information. Most people think that their information is available, financial information, and that is probably accurate. I don't think anybody questions their information from that viewpoint. People don't like their numbers. They don't like the fact that it costs so much to educate the children. Cost per student. It seems high when you compare it to other institutions of equal size and number of students. But nobody seems to question the accuracy of their information. Now, the K through 8 system, on the other hand, is always questioned about the accuracy of their information. Has been ever since I came back 7, 8 years ago. I don't know about before that, but can never seem to get the facts. The information you do get is often not accurate. The information you do get is often not timely. So, as I look at it, Gilbert's nose is not growing because we trust them with information. The town does. The taxpayers do. However, K through 8, that's another story. They have lost all credibility by the Board of Finance and Board of Finances in the past, by the taxpayers, by many of the voters in town when it comes to numbers. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that. First of all, in the last 5 or 6 years, they've had 4 or 5 financial directors. That's not good. They've gone for long periods of time with either no financial director or part-time financial directors that worked a day or two a week. That doesn't help the situation because their underlings in the K through 8 system have to fill in and are often overloaded because of the absence of the financial director or whatever. At one time, Gilbert and the public schools, K through 8, used to share the same computer system for processing their information. That was good because everybody could get a look at it and they could look at each other's because they all spoke the same language, the same computer system. That's not true anymore. Some years back, Gilbert, the school K through 8 went off with a different computer system. By the way, Gilbert always had their own, so you'd have as many as 3 computer systems, Gilbert's, K through 8, and the town. But since there is a distrust of the numbers from Gilbert, the town's was more important. When they switched off the same system that the town was using, it became even more concerning because distrust kept sneaking in as monies were approved at budget time and then moved around during the year without total disclosure to the taxpayers or the town, in my opinion, and the opinion of others. Now, people don't question their ability to teach as much as they question their ability to manage, to budget, and run an efficient education system. With Gilbert, they trust their ability more to manage the budget because they almost always do meet their budget. However, people do question their ability to get more from the students that they accept into the school. Now, K through 8 has other problems that perhaps Gilbert doesn't have, and that they have to manage the bus system. Now, the bus system, we just signed a deal for, I think, 3 years for $4 million. Well, when I was a kid, only the people who lived way out on a farm many miles away took a bus to school. So it wasn't that much of a factor 50 or 60 years ago. But now I'm told, and I may not have all the facts here because I don't have time to be an expert on the subject, but every child gets bused to school with the exception of some that go to Hinsdale, and they don't walk. Matter of fact, they have to be picked up from their front yard and bused to school and back. And part of the reason for that is the liability that the school, for one reason or mandate or another, has for making sure they get there safely and they're returned home safely. I can't even take a neighbor's kid off the bus when the neighbor is not there in time without having a note signed from the neighbor to the bus driver, no matter how well I know the neighbor, whether they're related or not. And sometimes children now, if you follow a bus, they'll all gang up and talk to each other while they're waiting for the bus. But when the bus comes, they run to their own yard to be picked up by the bus, where at the end of the day they will be dropped off. So all that has crept into our system. A lot of it because we're more legally conscious now than we ever have been before, thanks to the attorneys and lawyers who make a lot of money suing for liability around America, and the mandates that come from the town, state, and federal governments. So I think we spent about $1.2 million on the bus system. Wouldn't that be better spent on other things, like better teachers, more brand new books, maybe a few more courses? Of course, part of the other problem is we moved our schools out into the country, like Region 7. Go up to Region 7 about 8 o'clock in the morning, you'll see a whole string of buses coming down. And then in the afternoon, well, in the morning they go back once they, with all the students, and then in the afternoon they take all the students home and then come back again. Now, when I say all, I'm sure there's some exceptions. But all this costs a lot of money. And if it weren't for all the mandates and the legal liabilities and all, I'm certain that that money could be better spent either by the education system or by the town or if not that, placed in the fund balance as a hedge for the future. Now, we also have a big problem in our K through 8 system, which I think is they're trying to resolve now in the new budget. We have to ship all the people with extreme needs out of district, which costs money. You got to pay to get them there, you got to pay to go where they're going, and you got to pay to get them back. I think they're trying to address that problem now, but that's a big part of the K through 8 budget. This Pinocchio you see here, I picked over at the, I took a friend of mine over to the hospital in Hartford. I think it's a Yukon hospital, I'm not positive. And I saw this in the gift shop, this Pinocchio. Again, it's more like the Italian Pinocchio than the one you're used to seeing in the Walt Disney movies. This one's actually a puppet with puppet strings, and you can move its arms and legs and have it dance and all that kind of thing. It won't sing, of course, but so that's what that puppet is there. It also has kind of a long nose, as you can see. So anyway, we've got these things now that we have to do that we never really had to do in our systems in the past. And then we have a lot of unfunded mandates of all sorts. No Child Left Behind, all that kind of stuff. Where special needs and special attention has to be given. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. My program here is basically, in non-budget times, is basically a plea to the town to get more profitable, recurring, additional tax money in the town to pay for these mandates and things. But we really goofed that one up, led by our mayor and her supporters a few years ago, when we didn't follow through on the splendid opportunity we had for the development on the 600 acres down the Route 8 corridor, Enterprise Corridor. That won't happen for many, many, many years, if ever. So we're stuck here with these 600 acres that are owned now by the developer, and no additional recurring, profitable tax revenue coming in to our town. We do lack industry. We lack businesses that provide jobs and pay what we call a personal property tax for all their equipment, trucks, machinery, and typewriters, computers, everything else they might have. So we're in a corner here. We're in a bind. We're in a bind because with all these mandates and with all the importance placed upon education now that wasn't placed as highly when I was a child, costs money. And we don't have any money. The fund balance is down to about $400,000, supposed to be about $1.5 million. If this budget passes on the 28th of the month, Saturday, just before Memorial Day, we'll get that fund balance boosted up to $1.1 or $2 million, some of which will be reserved for things, but we'll be closer, and maybe next year we can add more to it if we manage our money wisely and construct our budget wisely for the next fiscal year, and this budget passes on the 28th. Now, the school systems this year came in asking for about $1.2 million more than last year initially. That was their request. We just didn't see how they could live without it. It was the end of the world for them if they didn't get it. But 4 of the finance board members, also select people, One selectman didn't even show up for the vote. The other two voted against the cut. But the four finance board members and selectmen that are concerned about the needs of the town, they voted not to give them that 1.2 million extra, and to also reallocate the money that they should have saved by moving 7th and 8th grade to Gilbert, and some of the money they did save by having Gilbert reduce their cost per average student by $3,000. That adds up to a lot of money. It's more like it's up over $1 million because they have their school two-thirds full of students now instead of 1/3 full of students, roughly. And also, we, the town, our education system, has lost somewhere between 220 to 300 students over the last 5 or 6 years. The numbers vary a little here. And some towns and cities have gone to the state and received a reduction of $3,000 per lost student in the minimum fund balance requirement. I'm sorry, the minimum education budget that the state requires every year, and you can be fined if you don't follow that rule. So our 4 wise selectmen are leading an effort in Hartford. They might not win this effort, but they're trying to get our minimum education budget requirement reduced by $3,000 for all these students that have been lost, as the state has done for other towns. They're also trying to get it reduced for the money that we saved by moving 7th and 8th grade to Gilbert, which will happen next fiscal year, and for hopefully closing down one of the schools. So they cut the budget requirement back to $8.5 million from our town, and that will mean a 0 increase in the raise of taxes. There'll be no increase in taxes if the budget passes on the 28th of May. And there is every indication right now that it will pass. And the reason it'll probably pass is that people are feeling it in their pocketbook. And most people, when in trouble, in difficult times, do vote their pocketbook, even though they do it reluctantly. And probably don't tell anybody else how they voted. When I was brought up, we were taught by our moms and dads to never tell anybody how you vote. And I think that was for political reasons, because they had to work in the factory with people of different political persuasions. They also never told anybody how much they earned. They didn't wear it on their sleeve like people do today. That was the biggest secret they kept, how much they earned and how they voted in the ballot. We still have people in town here. By the way, this puppet, Pinocchio, again the Italian version, where the tradition started, I've got at the dump. I went up there one day and a lady said knew I collected Pinocchios, and she said, "Brian, I got a Pinocchio here." So I bought it up at the landfill from their little store, and I have it in my Pinocchio collection now. But anyway, the selectmen, finance board, cut the requirement back. There's a big squabble about it. They're dealing with the state about the minimum balance. Minimum budget requirement. And they may lose that. If so, we might have to rethink how we do things. But people do think that this is the right thing to do. Most people I talk to say the buck's got to stop somewhere. This has got to stop. We got to address the inefficiencies in the school system. And we've got to get to the point where we trust the information, we trust the people running it, and we know that our money is being used wisely, and that people are always telling us the truth and showing us the information, including us as part of the management process. After all, it is our money. So we're going to have to live with these mandates because they're too difficult to change at the state and federal level, especially when the socialists are in power, because they're going to put more mandates on rather than take away any mandates if they have their way. So we have to live within them just like we have to within our own family. When gas goes up, we have to live with that. When food prices go up, as I said in my little song, we have to live with that. When somebody gets ill in our family, even our relatives, our grandmothers, or uncles and aunts, we have to pitch in and help. There's sacrifices that have to be made. And we, as a town, we have to pull together and get our children the best education that we can afford within our means, and encourage them all to get a part-time job so they can see what money is all about, and also to learn from people in business that employ them as part of their learning experience. So with that, we're getting towards the end of this program. I'll have one more next week about the budget, and then we'll switch back to revenue again, unless the budget fails. I don't think it will fail. But I encourage you all to get out and vote on May 28th. You'll see the signs up around town. And to try to help us manage the system in a responsible way. And then we have to concentrate all next year on putting together a budget that improves the efficiency in our school systems and wherever else it's needed in our town budget. So I'm going to play the blues again, the Talking Winsted Education Town Blues. Thanks to Woody. See you next week.
To Woody, the Talking Winsted Education Town Blues. I went downtown the other day to see what the educators had to say. Their mood was glum, to say the least. Thought the finance board spoiled their feast. It's a tough budget request in an election year. An additional 7% or so was a request many feared. The recession has taken its toll, so they say. Townfolk ain't got no money to pay. 4 wise board members, they managed it down, asking where are the savings that should abound. They say 18.5 million should be enough. Comparable towns do it. Can't be that tough. Schools half empty, so they say. Still have all those bills to pay. Town and schools are still debating. Seems to be plenty of duplicating. Moving 7th and 8th is in the final stage. Most thought this move should save. Close one school and use the others. Not well appreciated by the mothers. Student rejections over the years, yet mandate reductions are in arrears. A large dollar reduction we may have coming. Sure could use a relief or something. The cost per student's been reduced. Yet the dollar request hands the taxpayers a noose. In all those mandates, so they say, just like local families have to pay. Educators cry, 18.5 million's not enough to pay wages, medical, and all that stuff. Last year's budget was overspent. The fund balance is now low. The town surplus went. Expenses gone up. It's very tough. Pocketbooks gone down. There's not enough. Out of work, some residents are. Can't afford enough gas for their car. Commodities leaping by a large percent. People ask where their food money went. Educators, they don't take heed. They think it's just the taxpayers' greed. Let's sue the town, the educators cry. It can't be denied. The mayor's probably on their side. Let's ask the state to help us out. Investigate the town for the supposed expenses route. The K through 8 program, well, it's imploded. That's for sure. Gone haywire. The numbers are pure. FOI information the finance board must do to get the numbers that are most likely true. The finance board has helped. If the budget's approved, the depleted fund balance will greatly improve. The town will have more money to spend. The education budget will be on the mend. The vote is soon, as we all know. Let's hope the voters, many will show. The budget must balance once it's done. If the town is ever to see the sun, the problems will not be over as yet. More efficiencies are needed. We'll have to get. Let's plan for next year, or we'll all regret. Or much more money the educators will again have to get.